Let's not pretend we might be ill, but we're on the mend. It never starts, it never ends. Welcome to Craig and Friends. Welcome to Craig and Friends. Welcome to Craig and Friends.
Dear listeners, no matter the date on the calendar, today is Valentine's Day, because it's always Valentine's Day when you bring on the insidious glamour artist, mental health nurse, and frontline worker who will heal your body while stealing your heart. So, put your hands together and help me welcome the darling of Darlington, Ms. Cherry Valentine. Welcome, Cherry.
Hello, darling. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. How's your day been going?
Good. It's been all right. Yeah, just busy. It's been a bit hectic at the minute.
Really? Why?
Just little things going on. That's all. Just loads of things going on.
Yeah, little things, you know. Yeah, exactly. You chat about some soap operas that you like to watch, right? Because that's the TV stuff. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
It must be a crazy onslaught, particularly with the lack of activity of the last year, but you've not been lacking in any activity. You've been straight into the frontline work, and also you work as a mental health nurse, so you must have been sort of split between the two recently.
Yeah, I mean, it's been non-stop, really. I'm quite envious of the people who've been at home for the past year, just watching TV and catching up on Netflix. But yeah, it's been very wild, but it's been very eye-opening at the same time.
In what way?
I just feel a lot different about life now. I just really appreciate that life is way too short and that we shouldn't take anything for granted. I think working through the pandemic plus coupled with Drag Race, it's just made me more confident and like open with everything.
Sure. Now, working during the pandemic must be quite something, particularly, I mean, in your line of work, because you're a mental health nurse, but you also do, actually, maybe it would be better if you describe for me what you do in these times.
Yeah, I mean, initially, yeah, it was just a very mental health focused. So I did a lot of therapy. It was, mainly talking therapies and medication management, stuff like that. But then when we stopped filming for Drag Race, I went back into nursing, and it was a completely different landscape. So It was like there wasn't enough people working in the physical side. So I was doing shifts in A&E and places that I'd never worked in. It was very physical health focused, things that I'd never really done before.
Sure.
But it was invaluable experience at the same time.
I can imagine. But with focusing on mental health, though, I imagine that you were helping other people around you at the beginning of the pandemic anyway, before you went into the all hands on deck hospital situation.
Mental health has always been like a massive, massive thing in my life. Like I used to take it for granted when I was younger because I didn't really understand what it was. I just thought it was something like, we've all got problems and we need to deal with them. Maybe it was the way I was brought up, but as I've come to realize that mental health is such a massive thing nowadays, like especially in the current climate and everything, like I'm just really focused on people opening up and talking about how they actually feel. And before I went obviously to the show and the pandemic and everything, that's all I was doing primarily, just therapy.
Yeah. Now, when did you start that? When was your interest first twigged about mental health? Because as you said, when you were younger, it wasn't really something you thought about. I think that's true of most of us.
I think it stems from not wanting other people to feel like I felt as I was growing up, because I felt like I couldn't really talk to anyone. I felt like I couldn't open up all the time. And I was very in my own head and I didn't really understand it. But as I went through college and school, I realized that there were people that you could speak to, like there was counselors, there was therapists that you could do that. So I think that's what really set it off for me.
So that was the first time that you were sort of made aware of it, and it was at school. So do you remember the first time you spoke to a counselor?
Yeah, I do. And it was the first and only time for a long, long time. Like I was struggling quite a lot at school because I was the only out gay kid at the time, and I come from a gypsy background and no one really talked about it, and I felt like I didn't really belong there. So the teachers approached me and said, do I want to speak to the school counsellor? And I was like, as a kid, you just like, yeah, I'll give it a go, but it'll be shit. Do you know what I mean? So I did
and
it.
You're like, whatever, I'll get out of this. I'll just I'll put in the time, I'll show my face, and then I'll get the fuck out of there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Tick the box and do it. So I went in and I just cried for the whole hour. Literally just cried my eyes out for the whole hour. And then didn't really talk about anything at all. Came out of it and I just then didn't talk about my feelings for a couple of years after that. But that was my first only experience for a long, long time, just sitting crying. So I didn't really have the best time. But I felt better for it in a way.
Right, but rather impactful, it seems, because then you later went into the field.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we all go through them times in our life where it's like sort of a crisis point, but we don't like acknowledge that it's fully a crisis point at the time.
Yeah.
So I love retrospect and hindsight. It's a wonderful thing to just like really reflect on things like that.
Now, do you think that we protect ourselves from acknowledging that we're in a crisis point sometimes because it'd be too much to actually acknowledge it on top of everything else?
Oh, absolutely. I think as humans, that's what we do. We're like programmed to just try and get on with everything. So when we look back sometimes and think that was a really tough time, it's a really good learning curve.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes you can be stunned at how you kept moving through the day during some of those times.
Yeah, I mean, we've had that's what it is, isn't it? We have full on breakdowns and like crises, then we open the front door and smile and like everything's normal. But
Right.
no,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
it's
You
not
still have to
always the
take
case.
care of the tasks, the this and the that.
Yeah, yeah. Like when we go food shopping or anything like that to the supermarket, we just smile and walk around and say hello to everyone. But actually inside we're screaming. But you don't.
No, you don't. And there's so many conversations where you're just like, "Oh, I'm fine. How you doing?" And it's completely the opposite of the truth.
Especially British people, I'm not sure like in different countries, but we just say, "Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, everything's great."
There is
Um,
a much more reticent approach to, or rather, the British are more reticent about talking about that stuff, right?
yeah, yeah. I'm not sure where that comes from. Maybe it's like a pride thing, or I don't know.
So I have ADHD, and a couple friends of mine who live in England recently got assessed,
Mm.
and they were telling me that it's not as believed, or it's not taken as seriously rather in England.
Yeah, there is a misconception that ADHD is just bad behavior a lot of the time, which is
Mhm.
not the case at all. Obviously, is myself and but
Exactly. My bad behavior has nothing to do with the ADHD, as I'm sure.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that's what like through school as well, especially a lot of young children get diagnosed with ADHD, and they're just like they get that name of they're just the naughty kids, but that's not the case. Like it can mean so many different things, and it's not just that behavior.
Right. Now, when you were a kid, it sounds, from what you said before and in your interviews and on the show, that it was kind of a tough time because of the situation that you grew up in. And could you describe it a little? Because I know that is it Romani? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, yeah, Romani, yeah, Romani.
Romani. So forgive me. So your background is Romani, and is it? I want to ask because I don't know how the description is preferred. Romani traveler, or are those separate identifications?
It depends. Like a lot of people like associate Romani with gypsy, and then the Irish traveller would be a traveller. But like some people use both, and I've just grown up always people called me both, so I don't really mind.
It's kind of like either term works.
Yeah, I guess so, because in essence of it being Romani, I mean, when I was younger, we used to travel around, so you technically are a traveller. Like you travel around, don't you?
How long would you stay in one place for at a given time?
It depends, because we normally used to travel like, and it's usually the case of the fathers, the men, traveling for work. So we just stay as long as they're working in the area or whatever.
When did you move to Darlington?
So I was born in Darlington. So Darlington's always somewhere that we used to come back. It was sort of like the base, the hub, if you will. So I did spend a lot of my time growing up in Darlington, and then obviously I went to school, and I wanted to stay through school. So I was there for quite a long time. I was really interested in art, but I didn't tell my parents that, obviously,
Uh-huh.
because I didn't really agree with that. But I went to college, and then I picked up psychology, literature, and then I also did fine art and textiles and stuff on the side, but they didn't know about that either. So they're always running in parallel to each other.
When you say that you kind of kept that stuff from them, what was the general attitudes at home just about things of that nature?
Well, growing up in a gypsy background, like it is very old fashioned. I hate using it old fashioned, but it is traditional
Sure.
values that they all hold. Like the men are the men and the women are the women. So the women tend to stay home all day and clean and look after the family, and then the men go out to work and earn the money. But it's very typical a lot of people would class as typical men jobs, like cars and building, and I was never interested in that. But that was always what I'd been brought up to like aspire to it, I suppose. Because that was what I thought in my head when I was younger. I would grow up and take over my dad's job as a mechanic.
It almost becomes unspoken that this is just what's going to happen, right? There's no discussion about it. It's the way it is.
Yeah, completely unspoken. Like I remember going to weddings and funerals and family events when I was younger, and the men would always sit with the men, the women would sit with the women, and they would never really mix. They would only really mix if they were going to the bar and buying a drink, or the women would go on the dance floor and force one of the men to get up. But it was very rare.
Right. And of course, the more interesting conversations, right, were at the women's tables.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what it was like. But we never spoke about that. And it was never a thing like, oh, this is what you'll do. It's just what you did.
You absorb a lot by just observing as a kid. That's part of the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Looking back now, I'm like, it's a bit odd that. Like, why can't everyone just sit wherever they want? But at the time, you're just like, yeah, I'll just stay with the men because I've been told that I'm a man. So it's so odd though, because it's not just strictly to gypsy communities. You see it all over, like even in TV, stereotypes all the time of men and women. So it's just very weird how it's
right. I think the stereotypes that we are bombarded with all the time are one of the worst things about it, because not only do we see it in whatever growing up situation that we have, but it's constantly repeated on television. And that's one of the great things, one of the many great things about Drag Race and similar shows is that it can offer up, other things to people, because a lot of times it's not that they're like hateful. I mean, there certainly are a lot of hateful people, but sometimes it's just that they don't see it, so therefore they don't understand it. And if they're not going to get a sense of what it is.
Yeah, exactly. I love Drag Race, so that side of it though, because it does really give a different taste to everyone, especially if you don't even know what drag is. Like, especially with it coming over to the UK quite recently, it has opened a lot of people's ideas of what is traditional and what is the normal, the future. I don't know.
When did you first start to have an inkling that you were gay?
From as long as I can remember. I was never interested in women romantically. I always just wanted to be the friends.
Yeah, sure. Again, the better conversations are going on with the girls. So
yeah, I love women. I think they're so incredible. And I've just always been really inspired by them. And I just, from as long as I can remember, I just never found women romantically enticing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it really came into the forefront of my mind when I was in my early teens, like 12, 13, 14. Because my mum sat me down and she's the one who said me, I never said it out loud to anyone, but she's the one who said, I know that you're gay, but let's not talk about it and let's not tell anyone.
Mothers always know, right? Mothers always know.
Yeah, she sort of knew it and told me that I was gay, but without do you know what I mean? It was very weird.
Yeah.
I still remember that now, and it's something that I always think, oh, maybe that's the first time that I really knew, put a name to it, because you grow up and I used to always be hidden from that, because anytime anything gay would come up on TV, it used to be flicked over straight away. So I didn't really get the opportunity, and there wasn't any internet really, and yeah, it was a different time. But I really came into my own, I think, when I came through school. So I was mid-teens. But as I said, I was the only out gay kid in school, but other people knew what gay was, so I started putting the pieces together. It was only maybe a year ago that I'd actually said the words to my mum, I'm gay. And I've never spoken to it with any other member of my family. I've never said that before. I'm sure you know by this point, because I've probably seen it on TV and all over the place, but on the internet. But I've never actually spoken about it. So yeah, I came out at school though to my close friends, and then the next day everyone knew, but no one really talked about it unless I opened the conversation.
What was school like in terms of getting along? Did you get along all right?
Yeah, school was school really. I was always that kid who didn't really have a solid friendship group, and I would always just float between different people. I never really felt like I fitted in anywhere.
Sure.
I think that's the case for a lot of people who grow up similar, but
yeah.
I always felt like the odd one out. So I told a couple of people who I spoke a lot more to, and there were some people who didn't like it, who I just avoided, but it is what it is. I mean, there's always bullies at school, and there's always people that you get close to.
As long as you have a couple, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's all you need. You just need a couple solid people through life, I think.
Now, what about when you went to college? Was that a much different experience?
Yeah, college was the first time that I actually started finding out that there was other people who were queer. Like, there was,
It helps when you're like, oh, there's other folks. What? Okay, great. You
yeah,
like
I'm
this
not the
too?
only one in the world. Because you do feel like that. You feel like you're the only one in the world. But yeah, I started discovering there was other queer people. I got friends with a lesbian, and I was like, oh my god, there's a lesbian. But it's just it really opened my eyes in college, and I think that's what spurred me on to want to do more as well, and like move away from my family a little bit. So that's why I moved to the other side of the country and went to university and all this stuff. But it definitely was a part of it that made me want to do that. Yeah.
Now, where did you move to when you moved far away? Because a big move away is a very definitive kind of thing, especially at the age that you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I went to university when I was 17, 18. So I moved out of the house. And then it was only like 2.5 hours away, but that's literally over the other side of the country for us.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Out moving country, that's quite far. But yeah, I just moved to the other side of the country and went to university and lived my own life and discovered myself properly, I suppose.
Now, what area is that you moved to?
Lancaster. So it was near the Lake District area.
Mm-hmm.
It's lovely.
Oh, I'll have to check it out sometime. I'm quite fond of England, but I've seen mainly London, and I want to check out Manchester and all that, but I haven't really.
Oh, it's a lovely place. Yeah, I live near Manchester now, and you need to come. It's fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. What was the first date that you went on?
The first date?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Is that too
first
probing?
date I
Is it too?
No one's ever even asked me, and I'm trying to remember. I mean, through like school and college, there was always that hidden from different schools. We used to go out and like drink in the park. It's a very British thing when you're younger to get someone to buy you a bottle of vodka and sit in the park when you're 15.
Oh yeah, yeah. And when you're that age, it's funny because you're just like, I want as much of this as I can get because I can't really get it that often, and I'm going to drink way too much of it, and then probably be put off of this one booze. But then I'm going to try really hard with the next one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's what it is. And then I remember being about 15, and there was groups of kids from different schools, and we would like mix sometimes. And there was always like that straight presenting guy who was like wanted to try something and knew you were gay. You were the gay kid of school, so
sure,
obviously you go to them. But yeah, I wouldn't say I went on an official date till I was like in my 20s.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And sometimes I ask that is, what was your first situation? So that was
yeah, that was without going too far into it. It was
yeah. Oh no, you don't need to. We can just get the bullet points, etc. Doesn't need to. So that was when you were still in living at home and everything. I'm just thinking about when you're coming home from that first time and you sort of have the secret on top of a secret and you're home.
Oh yeah, I got used to it though because it was sort of growing up. I would just live two lives. Like outside of the home, I was one person, and inside of the home, around the family, I was a completely different person.
And as a mental health professional, I want to get your take on how adept we are at just as people in general at doing kind of split lives.
I think sometimes it comes into effect without us even knowing or acknowledging it for a long, long time. Because when I was younger, I didn't know that. Like looking back, I can appreciate that I was living two separate lives, and it wasn't healthy to do that. And even now, I'm still learning how to mix things together. I always therapize myself because I like to put things in boxes. So I guess growing up, that's where I got it from. I would put family life in a box, and I would put school life in a box, and them two boxes would never open together.
Right.
You open one at a time.
In different rooms.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something in mental health that we talk about a lot, actually, is putting things into boxes to try and manage things and manage your feelings and open them when you feel like it and when you're ready, and learning to live with it open. I'm still getting there, and I think it's a whole life journey for us all to try and do that. It is a way of, I think, keeping us protected sometimes to try and separate everything.
And it's really hard for us to unlearn habits that have kept us, quote unquote, safe, whatever that might be, whether it's technically healthy or unhealthy.
Yeah, definitely.
What sort of patients did you start working with when you were starting in the mental health field?
Yeah, well, when I qualified in 2015, I went straight to working in psychiatric intensive care. So it was with adolescents as well. So it was people aged 12 to 17.
This is also known as the deep end, right? Because it sounds like you plunged right in. It's
Yeah,
intensive care and adolescence.
Yeah, it was. It's the height of difficult mental health working sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I just felt like I would be able to help. I
Sure.
just felt like I had all these skills that I'd built up through training, and I went to go and work with children, and they'd all obviously been detained into mental health sections, so they were all very in crisis point. So I did that for 3 years, and it burnt me out because it was tough.
Did you have a problem not taking the work home with you?
No, I found taking the work home all right.
Yeah.
I didn't do it. I could, as soon as I took my uniform off, that was it. Like I was.
Well, there you go, the boxes again. Now you can put an outfit with the box.
Yeah.
It's great. You got a whole set.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what part of it was. It's just through life, like I've grown up to be able to separate things easily. Like I could come home and forget about everything that's going on. But yeah, so I didn't really take it home with me that much. It was the fact that when I was there, it was very, very intense. And it just burnt me out.
It must have been really challenging to see someone who you're trying to help and you see that they're getting in their own way. And, one of those things when you're like, you can see someone younger falling through the traps that, you wish you could sort of guide them out of.
Yeah, exactly. And it is difficult as well, but when you find similarities with people's stories and you don't feel like you got through that, like, well. So it's like, how can I help this person when I know exactly what they're feeling? And I just want to say, it's all right, just cry it out. But it's yeah.
In the meantime, between your first experiences with the gentleman caller and college, what was the general atmosphere like at home? Generally happy?
Yeah, I guess so. We were always that family who know things are going on and we know things are up with people, but we don't really talk about it. So we just pretend everything's all right and all fine. So we talk about mundane day-to-day things.
Sure.
But we never had in-depth conversations.
I think that's really common, though.
Yeah.
It's so common that people almost don't even realize that can be an issue.
Yeah. And I think it's really, really healthy to be able to go to your parents and talk to them because they've grown up. They know what it's like growing up and they've got some good advice sometimes. But I don't think when we're young, we always appreciate that or want to talk to our parents because it's embarrassing as well.
Right. It's so loaded sometimes.
Yeah, it is. But generally, we were always that family, who just got on with it and we were all right.
And also we forget when we're younger and sometimes when we're older that our parents have their own shit. They went through whatever they went through, and then you think about the era that they went through it and how this stuff was not even remotely talked about.
Yeah, definitely. It was very rare that my parents would open a conversation about something that they'd done in the past. I remember once where I came back, I ran away from home for a few days at college, went off the rails a little bit and came back. And my dad was like, you need to go for a drive. So we'll go for a drive. And he just told me a bit about his past. And I was like, oh my God, you actually were young once.
Right. Oh, you had a role before this role. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought this was your first gig.
So it's very weird that when you open up, it's like, oh my God, you're actually like a person. Like,
yeah. It could be like that with siblings too. How many siblings do you have?
I've got a younger brother and an older sister. I talk to my brother still, but very surface level. I don't speak to my sister anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
That's all right. It's just because of Drag Race and being gay and all that stuff.
I was hoping it was something more mundane, just like that you didn't get along. That must be painful.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I don't really acknowledge things. Like, again, it's in a box. Do you know what I mean?
Well, sure. And like you said before, it's an ever changing thing. It's an ongoing process.
Yeah, without doubt. But I would just talk to people, even if it's not the people involved. Like, I've got a partner. We've been together for 8 years, and he knows more about me than I think I do about myself now.
Right. Right. Because some stuff you've said, and then once you said it, it's out of your head and gone.
Yeah,
Or
a problem shared is a problem halved. I'm all about positive energy and positive vibes, telling people to talk. That's what it's about.
especially because when you do open up about stuff, it immediately sort of dissolves the enormity of it, I think, because we can make our problems seem like we're not going to survive them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that I took from Drag Race. And like Drag Race is a TV show, and I know it's a TV show in my head, but it actually at the heart of it, it brings out so many important issues.
Yeah.
And the first time anyone ever asked me or I spoke about my family was on Drag Race.
Wow.
So I'm still learning to talk about it now. Do you know what I mean?
When I saw that on the show, I thought, wow, that's fascinating. Do you know what I mean? And also how brave to do it on a TV show. And also just to be like, well, I'm going to see how this goes. We'll see how this goes.
And that was my thought process. I was like, I'll give it a go. Why not?
Let's see. Do I read a card? What do I do? Let me TV show. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it was. No, honestly, that's what it was. I was just in a time in my life where I thought, why not? So I just did it. And
then you had to wait the longest out of anyone who ever had to wait to reveal anything because of the pandemic and everything. So it must have been an interesting kind of delayed process. Although, I mean, that's the only time you've come out on TV. So that's the only experience you had with it.
Yeah, no, it was because I had we'd filmed and then I went back in and I was working on the COVID wards and everything. And I had this burning thing in my head, I'm on Drag Race, but I'm doing this. What the hell am I doing?
I'm sure that must have cropped up whenever there was something that was either really disgusting in the ER. I'm on a TV show and that's coming out soon.
It was always in the back of my mind, what the hell am I Is this true? What's real? I don't know what's real. It was so weird.
Especially in a year where most things don't seem real. Even time seems to have shifted context.
It has. It's been a year. Where's the last year gone?
I know, it's so weird. And I think I got one haircut last year. That's the weirdest. I was thinking about that the other day because it's getting a little bit long, and I won't, because California now has a variant and all this stuff. I mean, I'm locked up like a veal. I go to maybe the store once in a while, and that's it. So I was like, well, let's see. It's either going to get real long, or I'm just going to get the clippers one day and go for it.
I was going to say, do you not do it yourself?
No. I'm glad it looks that way, though.
No, I didn't mean it like that.
Oh, I know. Gee, you like podcasts, right? And you know what? Maybe you want to make a podcast. And what's the best way to make a podcast, or rather, the best place to start doing it? Well, Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, let me tell you about it, because it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Oh, let me explain further. First off, it's free. It's a hosting site, and it takes care of all the particulars for you. So even if you don't have the gear that, for instance, I use, there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Then Anchor will take care of distributing your podcast for you, so you can hear it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to this right now. You can have yours. And the excitement just keeps on building, because guess what? You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Anchor has everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So if you've been meaning to make a podcast for a while, but you're not quite sure how to go about doing it, this is the way to do it. These are the people to work with. So go ahead and download the free Anchor app, or go to anchor.fm and get started.
I can't wait to see a dance floor again.
What's your favorite dance floor? Which is the one that you want to go back to the most?
What do you mean? I just want to go into a gay club.
Well, no, I mean, I figured that, but I mean, I was wondering, I should rephrase the question. Do you have a favorite spot? The one that you think of when we have the time to go out, or rather when we have the okay to go out?
Manchester, Canal Street. Have you heard of it?
Is this where Kiki is, or am I mixing that up with something else?
Yeah, that's where Kiki was. Yeah, I used to work in Kiki. Yeah, that's where I first did my first drag gigs. But yeah, Canal Street, it's such an amazing place. Everyone's just so queer. It's such good energy. It's fabulous.
It is a special thing when you're on a dedicated street, basically, to that. I remember at New York Pride a couple years ago being on the subway, and everyone in the car had flags on, and do you know what I mean? And everyone was kind of having a fun little chat, which is not the usual mode on the subway. It's usually kind of avert your eyes, all of that.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So when did you start working at Kiki?
When I was still doing nursing, but it was the end of 2018. I just went for a night out. I was in drag. My partner was working in a bar at the time. So I went out by myself in drag, and I was like, why not? I've been doing it behind the scenes. I think I'm confident enough to go out.
Yeah.
So I went out, and then I got approached if I wanted to start working there. And then a year later, I was doing 5 nights a week.
In the chat with Davina, you talked about modeling your drag aesthetic on the women in your family.
Yes.
It's the big hair. It's the grand gesture of looks.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, that's what the women did in my family. They were always had the hair done. And I say it all the time, and I don't know if people believe me, but my mum actually used to put her heels on and put her makeup on to go and get some milk from the shop. Like, it's not even an exaggeration. Like, they were just always so done up, always nails, earrings, jewelry. So I think that's where I got most of my style, because the hours I'd spend rooting through my mum and sister's stuff when they were out the house. Oh my God.
It sounds like it's part of the culture that we were talking about before, that the women are very, very distinctly feminine and done up when in public.
It is, yeah. And I think part of that comes from a bit like stereotype of women, I suppose, but that's what I grew up around. So that's what I'd known. Obviously now it's different, like you can wear whatever you want, but I personally just like super feminine things. So they would go out the house, and I'd be home alone and just have a little look around and walk around the house in my sister's heels. We used to have like tiled floors when we first went into a house.
It's a great sound. It's a great sound.
I love the sound of it here on a tiled floor. Oh. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, even now, my house now, I specifically wanted, I think it was subconscious, just tiles through all the bottom of the house. So I just put my heels on and walk around sometimes. Oh my God, it's fabulous.
It's the sound of going out. You know, there's a lot of sounds, associations with the sounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when was the first time that you were in drag in public? Because you said you went to Kiki in drag. Had you started going out in drag before that?
Literally, like, I think it was twice. And the first time was a couple of years beforehand. It was in Newcastle for Newcastle Pride, out with my partner and my best friend. And
this is Michael, right?
Yeah, this is Michael and my friend Katie. And she was just like, do you want to go out and drag? And I was like, yeah, why not? It's Pride. Everyone's going to love it. But I went out. It took me like 5 hours to get ready, and I looked exactly the same as I do now. We're just with a wig on. But I went out with I'd taken one of my sister's dresses without knowing as well, and I put that on, and I just I got ready and went out, and then we were out for about half an hour, and I didn't feel comfortable, so I went back, took it all off, and just went out in like the clothes that I would wear out of drag, but with a pair of heels on.
Sure.
So that was my first experience going out in drag. I think that was like 2017, maybe.
And then when you first performed, what numbers did you do?
When I first started performing, I always wanted to perform things that I loved. So I used to play loads of video games, and I still do now, but I used to love Tomb Raider when I was younger. So I did a performance for Tomb Raider when it was like PlayStation 1. And something really like fabulous, which was like Diamonds, A Girl's Best Friend, not Moulin Rouge.
Sure.
I like to mix it with like geeky, but with like quite fabulous and camp at the same time.
You know, that's the essence of drag, right? It's like to take the things that you're interested in, or any art form, really. You just take the stuff that you're in and you cut it up and put it together, and there you go.
I like things that make people think as well. Especially now, my aesthetics changed so much, like since I'd started doing drag. So I quite like really dark stuff now. I love horror movies.
Oh, what are some of your favorite horror movies? I love this topic.
I love The Conjuring, The Ring, Insidious is probably one of my favorites. And I love Saw because it's so creative.
Sure. Yeah, they got to come up with new ways to torture people every
They do. But I just think you can make something that's seen as dark, like beautiful and stunning. And that's what I like doing with drag, like having really like dark aesthetic. I'll be like fully done up, hyper feminized, but then have like full blackout eyes, like drooling with blood. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just that little weird twist. I love it.
When did you meet your partner?
It was when I first moved to university. One of my friends forced me to download Grindr.
You poor thing.
I know. So it was actually through a dating app, and I hate talking to people first. So he messaged me, and then we went for coffee, went to Starbucks, and we really just hit it off. And then 8 years later, we've got a house and a dog. And
Now, how soon was it before you were living together?
it was years. It was the first year of university, so I went through university, lived with student halls, and did my own flat stuff for a while. So it was a couple of years. Then we lived with his dad for a while we saved up for a house.
So are you a monogamous couple?
Yeah, I would like
Yeah?
to think so.
Yeah. As far as you're aware.
I'm kidding, but yeah, I guess we are. But I don't honestly, I don't know. Like, I'm not strictly about monogamy because I just think the human experience is so vast and varied. We should just be able to enjoy our lives. So I would be open if he came to me one day and said, whatever. I would be like, I'd talk about it. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not like shutting everything down. No, you can't do that. But
Sure.
I'm open in my mind, but we're not physically open now.
What's your general schedule like? I know that right now it's pretty press intensive and drag race intensive, but are you going back to the front lines anytime soon? Or are you splitting your time between?
I mean, I'm working now as a nurse, so
Right.
yeah, I went to obviously to film the rest of Drag Race in November, and then I went back into nursing. So I'm doing like vaccination centres and things at the minute.
So have you been vaccinated?
No, believe it or not yet. I'm dying for it though. I'm in line. So, but yeah, I am getting it, but just not right now. But yeah, I've been working in vaccination centres and helping out, try and get to some form of normality a bit quicker, extra pair of hands. I don't know.
Thank you for all that you're doing, because you're one of the people making it happen.
Oh, thank you. It's just something that I've just always done, so I've not really like, do you know what I mean? Like thought about it in that sense, but
without folks like you, we would be really screwed.
yeah, I think we all do our bit. Just we all do different things. Like without podcasts, I probably wouldn't be able to survive mentally either. That's all I listen to. I love them.
That's very sweet of you. Thank you. Is there anything else that you'd suggest to people during this time, or any time really, but particularly now, as a device or a tool to use when they're maybe not doing so well?
I would always just say find things that ease stress and anxiety, because anxiety is such a big thing. I get messages about it all the time, and people are constantly in my DMs like asking for advice about things. But I always, when I do therapy and stuff, I love to use the stress vulnerability model. I know it sounds really boring, but it's actually not boring.
What is that?
So think of your mind as like a bucket, and everything that stresses us out gets put in the bucket. So eventually the bucket overflows and you have a massive blowout and you can go off the rails, and like it really does affect your crisis point. So we have to like put holes in the bucket. So things that put holes in the bucket would be hobbies and things that make you happy, talking to people, focusing on things that you can control.
Sure.
So it's just about not letting it overflow, because that feeling of things overflowing and hitting crisis point is so like, we all know it. We all know what that feels like.
Right.
So it's just really important to acknowledge that as well.
And I think that's a great tip for people who might still have difficulty with reaching out, because that still can sometimes be the scariest thing, particularly when you're in a deep anxiety.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I recently I was having a bad day, and I just went and started watching movies on Prime, and I didn't know what they were, but they were sleazy. If they're sleazy and from the 80s, I'm good. I'm good. And then if there's like a ridiculous theme song, or if there's hookers, done.
I mean,
let's see. I watched Street Walking. That was a good one. Another one about strippers.
yeah, I love that. Pulp Fiction is. I love watching that sometimes when I feel like stressed. I just put that on and it's fabulous.
There's something specific about an action movie or a suspense movie or a combination of that can pull us out of whatever thought cycle that we're in.
Yeah, and I think that's why I like horrors as well, because it makes me feel a different way. So it forces you to feel something else. Do you know what I mean?
There's no getting away from it. Yeah.
Mm.
I've had a wonderful time chatting with you, Cherry. And I wanted to know if there's anything that you'd like to mention or talk about before we go.
No, I don't think so. It's been lovely to talk to you too.